Was there ever a moment where you thought, I'm never going to be released? Like there's no end to this. I'm going to be stuck here forever.
No. I knew that the U.S. government was going to come after me. The Canadians, the British, the Irish were trying. The Russians wanted something from the Americans, and I had promises from the U.S. government that they were coming for me.
Okay.
The State Department was promising. The National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, was promising. There were others in the U.S. government promising, and they said, "Look, this is just taking time. You need to be patient." And I'm a fairly patient person, but at the 5-year mark, I was just like, WTF? What are you guys doing? I mean, how long does it take to work out a deal? One person's here 3 years, one's here 10 months. I'm here 5 years. What are you guys up to?
But you never lost hope. You're always like, this is going to happen.
This is going to happen. And, there are some stories in the media. One of my friends from the camp wrote a story that's out there. In it, there's a funny exchange because people would always ask me, when you're going home, when are you going home? And my answer was always soon. I'd say it in Russian, soon. And that was from day one at the camp. When are you going home, Paul? Soon. And, it was kind of a bit of a joke because they were like, well, when is it? And I said, well, soon. It's a relative term.
Yeah.
But I never gave up hope that the U.S. government was going to come for me. They don't leave people behind. They do what they can to bring people back and try to take care of them. It doesn't always work the way we would like it to as quickly as we would. But they gave me a promise early on, and that promise went from one administration to the next administration, and they came through. I don't agree with everybody's politics, but I can tell you that the U.S. Congress, the House and the Senate, they came together, and with a bipartisan effort, they put pressure on the presidents, on the administrations, both of them, and did what they could to take care of me and my family and to get me home. And that's an important part because in the 5.5 years that I was held, I don't know of anything else the Congress did on a bipartisan basis.
Ultimately, in the end, what was the transaction? What was the thing that sealed the deal to get you home?
For everything that we're told and everything that we see, there's more to it. Mm-hmm. There are things that happen under the table, and nobody will ever tell me about the under the table deals. But what it took to get me home was the Germans agreeing to let Krasikov go. And when the Germans agreed to let Krasikov go, the logistics were worked out, and that's when Evan and I were free to leave. I mean, one of the saving graces, and I hate to say this, was that Krasikov, a Russian, he killed a Chechen, which is a Russian citizen, and the Germans said, okay, well, he didn't kill a German, so at least that's something we can work with. And the German government decided to not let bygones be bygones, but kind of let this one go for the sake of innocent people being released and going home. And
yeah,
I think there were 8 or 9 like German Russian citizens, dual citizens that were held in Russia that were also part of the transaction. Kara-Murza, he's a British Russian activist. He was released. There was a young kid, Kevin, and he was like 18, and he was Russian-German, and the Russians arrested him and said he was committing treason. He was just a kid, he was part of our deal. So, but it was really, when you looked at it, it was Evan and myself for Krasikov. Those were the major players. That's what everybody was after.
Do you remember, and I'm sure you do, first getting the news, I'm going home?
It was kind of a funny situation because I had knowledge of negotiations taking place, and I had a feeling that something would happen. I spoke to some people in the government, and they said, okay, well, be ready. In July of 2024, we had that kind of same scenario. And I called my parents and I said, hey, look, there's an opportunity that something might occur if you don't hear from me for a couple of days. That could be a good thing rather than a bad thing. Stay in touch with the consulate. The next day, the FSB came to the prison and they said, hey, get your stuff together that you want to take with you. You're going to the hospital. And I said, oh, really? I'm going to the hospital and you guys came to get me? Because the hospital camp was another camp. just like the one I was in, just down the road. So if you went to the hospital, they'd just take you in a van. The FSB wouldn't come to get you. I said, come on, you've got all these, high-ranking people here making sure, that from the prosecutor's office to prison service and the FSB, that you're not screwing something up. So you're not taking me to the hospital. So am I going back to La Fortiva? And the guy looked at me and he kind of like nodded just briefly. I said, okay. So I took my stuff, clothing, food, gear, medications, all these things, and I basically, distributed them to my friends and said, hey, look, you guys take this stuff. If I'm not back in 5 days, then keep it, right?
Yeah.
I put my bag together. I had mail, I had, clothing and whatever. And, off we go. Well, obviously I got in an FSB van and we drove back to Moscow, and I went to La Fortiva. So I was pretty sure something was happening at that point. So this would have been late July. When I got to La Fortiva, mostly the same guards that I dealt with prior to, and they were, whenever they saw me, they'd kind of smile a little bit, and they'd always go like this. And, to us, this means rally, right? Rally round. To Russians, this means be careful because somebody's listening. There are listening devices, maybe cameras. So they'd always go like that and, put their finger over their lips and say, hey, be quiet. And they would quietly say, you're here because you're leaving soon. They'd tell me, hey, there's another American here, a young guy. Well, that was Evan. They put me in solitary confinement, and I was there for 5 days. And then, I couldn't even leave to exercise or do anything at all. They brought food to me. But they came on August 1st, and they had a bag of my clothing that hadn't been washed in years. And they said, put some stuff on, you're going, you're leaving. And so I knew that I was going home. I got onto a bus out in the courtyard with some other prisoners. Evan was there. Alsu, I always pronounce her name wrong. It's Kurmasheva. She was a Russian-American journalist for Voice of America who'd been arrested, similarly to Evan. She was there. I recognized them. We were taken on a bus to a plane at a Moscow airport, like the foreign ministry plane. Each one of us had an FSB minder with us, wearing the masks and everything, all geared up. We got on a plane and they never actually told us, you're going to Turkey, you're going to be exchanged, you're pardoned, nothing. They just basically got our gear, they put us on a plane, and they took us to Turkey and got us off the plane and left with their people. I mean, it was an odd situation. I'd kind of thought maybe they'd take us to court. A judge would say, you're pardoned or your case is dismissed or whatever. Here's some documents. They didn't do anything like that at all.
Was there a point to where you knew like this is over? Was it not till you got to Turkey
Well,
I mean, because there's got to be a point to where you're like, it doesn't feel like it's quite going to happen. It's always still a chance, and then you're like, okay, this is done. I'm free.
So in Turkey, and I have to keep some of this back because there are agencies that don't want me to discuss too much, and I'm also trying to write a book. But in Turkey, suffice to say, the CIA was running the show, and the CIA had brought in the Russian prisoners from the other countries. They were helping with this exchange. I got on a CIA plane to come back. Evan and Alsu were with me. The other prisoners went to in different planes to different countries.
This is the Russian prisoners that we exchanged.
Yeah. Those guys went to other countries. Alsu, Evan, and I were in CIA plane coming back to the States. And I thought, okay, well, I'm surrounded by air marshals and CIA and State Department people. I'm in good hands. It's a CIA plane. But, we're still flying over Turkey, which is an ally of ours, even though they're not. Yeah. We're still flying over areas that, could have, bad actors, right? So, I'm just kind of a little bit wary. But there was a tracker, like a GPS tracker, that showed our route, on a screen. So I was watching it. And when we got to France, I said, well, I'm looking out the window. I can see the ground. It's a small plane. We're not that high up. I can see the ground. And we're crossing Dover. And, I looked out and I saw the white cliffs of Dover. So I knew I was back in friendly territory.
Yeah.
So.
Does that when a wave of emotion hit?
Yeah, and it still does. It still does. You know, during the war, the White Cliffs, which are very, very prevalent, guided the Spitfires home.
Yeah.
And so, you know, having been away for so long, seeing something like that I actually recognized, at that point I knew that I was free.
Was there any piece of intelligence that you could share that you were able to give to one of these agencies that you think makes us more like equipped as a nation, makes an international security interest?
Well, one of the things I did, and this was difficult for me, and I had to weigh this in my mind. When I was in the labor camp, friends of mine went off to war, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were
to Ukraine war.
Yeah, they went to the war in Ukraine. They were reporting back to us, using their burner phones about, where they were, what they had, what they didn't have, the conditions and whatever. And I had a dilemma because I knew that was intelligence, and I knew it was actionable. And do I sit on it, or do I give it to our people who could then use it or share it with Ukraine or what have you? So I made the decision to send all of that information back to our people.
While you were in camp?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
some might call that spying.
Well, I don't even convicted for it.
On the good side, I'm on your team. But
what the heck?
I'm saying that was man.
It could have been problematic.
It could have been problematic. Yeah. So that was brave of you to do that.
Yeah. Thanks. I couldn't sit on it because it might have helped save the lives of some Ukrainian soldiers. And Trevor Reed went over to Ukraine. I didn't know this at the time, but Trevor was fighting the Ukrainians while I was still locked up. I didn't know what impact it could have, but I knew I couldn't sit on it, and it was something that I had to think carefully, and that's where faith comes in. I had to think carefully about what I was going to do, because while I was giving that information to our people, it could have been costing some of these young Russians that I knew their lives.
Yeah.
I didn't know, but I thought,
that's real honorable. You did that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. I thought it could help, so I did it. I provided all of the information I could to our people about how the Russians operate, how they do things, how they surveil people, what problems they have, the state of their equipment and their facilities and whatnot, and then just some of the stories and things that they told me, and then information I garnered from the prisoners in the camp. The state of the Russian intelligence services is pretty poor. Mm-hmm. The FSB, the SVR, their counterintelligence, it's really poor. Yeah. They've got a special unit that's just set up to go after foreigners, to hold them for hostage issues. Evan Gershkovich just did a good article in the Wall Street Journal about this.
So you're saying that there's an office within the FSB.
The FSB that's been stood up to just take foreigners hostage for these sorts of trades.
The exact same thing you went through.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a good article.
Yeah. Where can you find that again?
Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
It's online. I'll make sure you have a copy of it.
Yeah.
The GRU, their military intelligence, doesn't like the FSB, and they fight. And this is one of the things that Putin does. He pits his people against each other. So instead of having all these people like working together and having a decent budget and whatever, he splits them up and then makes sure that they fight. And that's how he keeps control.
They're constantly trying to gain favor with him.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's probably different phases throughout this 5 years that you've had to experience all of those. You're making sure you're healthy, making sure your mind stays in the right place. I love the fact that you never lost hope. You knew you were coming home. Socially, you had access to your family and an encouragement of your family. I'm very curious if faith was a factor for you. I haven't asked you what your faith is, and was faith a factor for you through this?
It was. Yeah, it was. There are no atheists in foxholes, and there are no atheists in Russian labor camps. You have to hold dear to whatever you believe in, whatever your faith is, and however that manifests. And just trust that you're being taken care of.
Did you have access to a Bible while you were there?
That's an interesting piece. The Russians would never let me have a Bible because they said it was too difficult for them to censor. There was too much in it. And I said, well, that's ridiculous.
The Muslims had Qurans?
They did. Yeah, in Arabic. Yeah, but I couldn't have an English Bible.
Wow.
What
do you think that means when it's too difficult for them to censor?
It's a lie because they censored all sorts of other books.
Right.
I had a lot of English books, and they censored all sorts of things. They didn't want me to have a Bible because they're, godless communists.
Yeah.
To be quite honest,
Yeah.
they still believe in all the old communist, socialist nonsense, and they're godless.
You've had an incredible, crazy journey, and you've displayed incredible resilience and just the posture and tone in which you're sitting here today after
Thank
only
you.
being released a few months ago. What's it feel like right now for you to be free after these years of captivity?
It's a unique experience. Everything seems familiar, but it's brand new. Traveling, driving a car, just being free to do whatever I want. It's surreal. There's no one looking over my shoulder. There are no fences, no gates, no barbed wire. I'm in a country where I understand the languages, I understand the culture. So it's an incredible free feeling, and you can't beat this kind of freedom. People don't understand just how bad some areas of the world are, and how the people are oppressed. And Russia is one of those countries.
You were in captivity for 5 years?
5 years, 7 months, 5 days.
Yeah, you were accurate with that. I'm sure you
I
were.
count, every day.
Did technology change? Like, what's new that in America that you hadn't seen?
The first time I used Lyft and a Tesla turned up, I had no idea how to get in. And then once I got to my destination, I had no idea how to get out. So, just simple things like that. I've run into some technology challenges here and there. Usually I have to ask one of my friends to ask their teenage son or daughter to help me through it.
Upon coming home, I mean, I know that had to be a process with the government and things like that, but what's the first thing you did personally? Like, you were like, I have to go do this one thing.
I wanted a steak and I wanted cheesecake. So we went downtown and, ate well.
Do you have any final words for those listening about being resilient in the face of adversity?
In the Marine Corps, we used to always say, when you're challenged, you should fall back and regroup. Don't surrender, don't turn tail and run. Fall back and regroup. And I think if people find themselves in a challenging situation, whether it's at school or at work or standing in line at a grocery store, or if heaven forbid they're taken hostage by a rogue regime, they need to fall back and regroup and just think, okay, what can I do to fight back? How can I resist? Even just singing the national anthems of my country to remain positive and to remain in control. And every day is a new day. Sometimes every hour is a new hour. And just take the attitude that people are going to come, people are going to help. It will end at some point, but just have faith in your own spirituality. Have faith in your government, your family and friends that people are going to come and do the right thing for you.